Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Viewers, we are very uh, privileged and we are very lucky to have with us today a guest who is joining us from Singapore and who has been in various leadership positions for the last 30 years. And he is in an excellent position he is in an excellent position to advise students on what to do in order to become successful people in their lives. As you know, right now our focus is on what is important now and what is going to be important after 2030, because we have only 5 years to go uh, when 2030 arrives. And these days, the generation gap has really shrunk. When we talk about the generation gap, we are not just talking about generation gap between people. We are also talking about generation gap between various technologies, between various bodies of knowledge. And this generation gap is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. So what we are expecting is that the world as we know today is very different from the world that will emerge in 2030 and after that. So you have to be ready for it, and you can prepare yourself for such time by getting insight from people who are there in the thick and thin of things. And that is why we are very fortunate to have with us Mr. Ansar Ali, who is joining us from Singapore on a Sunday, and he is and he is and he is the is in a leadership position. He's a manager in the leadership development team. Apart from that, he has also trained people all around the world. So I would like to welcome Mr. Ansar Ali. Welcome to the program, Ansar Saab.
Thank you very much, Nadeem. I'm waiting for you to unmute me. Thank you very much, Nadeem. I'm honored and very pleased to be here. Warm welcome to everyone who's joining us live and also to those who might watch the recording later.
So as always, we do have some internet related issues, some technical issues, but I'm sure you're going to bear with us because the things that you will take away from this discussion are worth taking away and worth the patience. Without further ado, I'd like to put the first question to Ansar Saab, and that is, you're from Unilever. What is Unilever exactly? What do they do? What is their size? And tell us more about the company.
Nadeem, Unilever is a fast-moving consumer goods company, FMCG as we call it, or CPG as it's known, consumer packaged goods in the US. It's a behemoth. We've got 400 brands. We are a multi-billion-dollar business. We've got at least 13 brands that are $1 billion or bigger. And I've been very fortunate in my past life as a marketer to have led and grown several of those brands. We have an international presence. We are in 192 countries. We have brands that I'm sure most of your audience will be familiar. We've got a huge presence in Pakistan, but it's not always obvious that it's a Unilever brand. But Surf, in the past, Lipton and Brooke Bond used to be Unilever brands as well. And of course, we've got Dove, Ben & Jerry's, loads of brands which belong to Unilever. So it's an everyday household business. And I've been privileged to be with them for almost 2 decades with Unilever. And Unilever has almost been like a passport to me. I originally started in the UK in London, worked in Pakistan for a brief time. But then I've spent the last close to 20 years outside Pakistan with Unilever. Almost a decade in the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia, half a decade in Europe, in the UK, and now the last 10 years here in Singapore in Southeast Asia.
So what a journey it must have been for you. We will try to learn from that in a bit. But do tell us something about the current position that you hold, the leadership position, and what do you do, and what have you done? Where all have you trained people, and in what disciplines have you trained them?
Sure. So Nadeem, it's been quite a journey, like you remarked. I started off my career as what I call an accidental marketeer. And if there's time, I'll relay that story later. But I did that for the better part of 20 years. And then very late in my career, I made this pivot into HR, but more specifically L&D, learning and development. And this is a role that literally is very much aligned to my purpose. Not that I didn't enjoy marketing, that was the precise problem. I was enjoying my previous role way too much. Marketing will always be my first love. And even to this day, there are brands that I hold and in deep admiration and aspiration. I wish I could have worked on them as a marketeer. But this current role is literally a switch from consumers to colleagues, from brands to people. And it allows me to impact lives even more immediately than I did previously. So it's about upskilling the organization. Unilever is a massive organization, and dare I say, a complex one. We've got 126,000 employees globally. And what this role allows me to do, primarily, I'm in charge of two of our global learning centers. We are blessed to have two state-of-the-art, custom-built learning centers, one in Singapore, one in London. And I'm blessed to be splitting my time between these two beautiful sites. But apart from these learning centers, which are also fully residential, and we look at learning in a very holistic way, not just what happens in the training room, but also how we can make every opportunity count, from breakfast to fireside chats in the night. So we look at curating experiences and really allowing delegates who fly in from different parts of the world to make the best use of their time together. Beyond that, I'm also very privileged to be impacting the global learning agenda in Unilever, to decide where we would focus, which skills we'll be looking at, also for different levels and different functions across Unilever. We do believe in leadership development. We're almost like a school of marketing. We're also known as a CEO factory, because many people who leave Unilever become natural leaders across industries. And therefore, a big part of my job involves curating the right learning experiences, delivering them myself, working with external partners, reaching 15 or 20,000 global leaders at a time to ensure that our footprint goes as deep and as wide. Also coaching for our very senior leaders, and also facilitation of our leadership teams, workshops for them.
All right, thank you very much for that. So let's go back in time a little bit. When we were students, we used to hear about something called the time shock, and this is not the 21st century. We are talking about the last century, and we heard about the time shock, and that a time will come when people will be required to adapt so quickly, that it will either make them or break them. So when we are looking forward to 2030, what will be the nature of the time shock in the future, and how much of this time shock will students experience, and what should they do to absorb it and adapt to it?
The entire question, but I think I got the gist of it. The network's not the best. I think very simply, there will be no time, there will just be shock. So sadly, that's not going away. The intensity and severity will only multiply. And therefore, this is true. This is the reality. It's already happening, and it'll happen in 2030 even more so. Just to give an example, which may uh, resonate with your audience, I remember when I was doing my degree, when I was in my first year, and I'm taking everyone back a few decades. This is 1994 to be precise. I was doing an accounting and finance degree in the UK. And you know what's typical of Pakistani students? I made sure that I really built some relationships with people a year ahead of me. And I still remember someone very close that I've lost contact with. I used to call him Atif Bhai. So I don't know if Atif Bhai is listening to this. Hi, and please reconnect with me. He was a year senior to me. He was really good. And I really chased him to give me his notes. And you'll be surprised, as hard as I had to work to get those notes, and thank you, Atif Bhai, for giving them to me. Literally, I was only a year behind him, but those notes, I never told him, but I'm revealing it today, were absolutely obsolete and redundant for me. Even though we were only a year apart, already the time shock was such that what I was learning in the same course a year later was very different. And therefore, the shelf time is reducing, the shock value is increasing, and going forward, the number one skill or the number one skill set will be agility, so you can absorb the time shock.
So that brings me to my second question: how important is it going to be for students to find skills rather than work in the market of the future?
So I would flip that, Nadeem. Very simply, my response would be, if your students can find the skills, work will find them. Literally, that will be the order of things. The focus has to be on the skills, and work will follow. I was in a conference just last week here in Singapore, and the title of the conference itself was Future of Work. So very much relevant to our topic today. And the vice president of LinkedIn was there. And in her keynote, one of her key messages were that job titles will very soon become irrelevant. I don't think she's even talking about 2030. She's talking about within the next 24 to 36 months. Job titles will become irrelevant, roles will become insignificant, and skills will define who we are. So therefore, my message would be to focus on skills and what I would call get the skills advantage for the gig economy. The gig economy is really reframing how we view things today. So, even from our time, Nadeem, that whole concept of a single employer, that you spend your life working for 40 years for the same employer, that concept was anyways redundant, even in our time, the single lifelong employer. But even now, just thinking in terms of a single employer at a time is a redundant theory. I would urge your students to think of multiple sources of income, multiple sources of their salary, and to be really based on their skills, be working in what I call the gig economy, which is really multiple employers, and based on your skills, you provide them services.
So, as the old saying goes, you have to have some knowledge in order to gain knowledge. So, you have to have some skills in order to learn a very important skill, which is called the skill of uh, uh, being a lifelong learner or learning your entire life. So, what things should a student imbibe in order to become a lifelong learner in the future?
That's a great question. What are the skills that you need to acquire, other skills that are critical? And I would say three. So, number one, and in order of prioritization, number one is curiosity. I think anything can start or stop if you fail to have curiosity. So, वो जैसे उर्दू में कहते हैं खोज होना. You really need to hone that skill of curiosity. Ask questions. We live in the day and age of questions. The answers are all out there, but are we asking the right questions? So having an innate, deep sense of curiosity is what I would say number one. Don't assume anything. Ask questions, be curious, seek the answers, speak to people, find out, read, search, use AI, whatever you need to. So, number one is curiosity. Number two, I would say, is adaptability. We spoke about the time shock earlier. The time shocks are only going to get more and more frequent. So, therefore, being adaptable, being able to quickly change, be flexible, and what was true today will not be true tomorrow. So, being adaptable constantly is what's going to be critical. And the third one, which I think is a real superpower skill, is resilience. And the way I would define resilience is not that you are artificially macho and strong and you don't feel any emotions. No, we're all human. If you're not feeling any emotions, you're not living. But the fact is, while there will be setbacks, while you will feel, you will experience failures and you will feel down, the idea is how quickly do you bounce back? Resilience is all about how quickly do you get up again. So those would be the three power skills in order to acquire other skills: curiosity, adaptability, and resilience. एंड मैं कहूँगा, अगर आपको इन तीनों में से कुछ भी याद ना रहे, तो एक मास्टर की विच वर्क्स एवरी टाइम इज एटीट्यूड. Attitude trumps aptitude any day. This is a quote my father always used to repeat, and now I've seen it in practice in my career as well. If you've got the right attitude, you will be far ahead of anyone who seemingly has the aptitude but not the attitude.
It's very it's very apt that you mentioned. Thank you very much. These three things, of course, are you've given a lot of wisdom in a few sentences, and that is always a challenge. So, but speaking of resilience, you know, as you know, I give all my examples from the area of politics. So when President Kennedy had his first debate with President Nixon, Vice President Nixon at the time, and it went live. It was the first debate that went out live. So the first one was good for President Kennedy, but the second one was not very good for Senator Kennedy at the time. So the moment the debate got over, someone came and said in his ears, in Kennedy's ears, "Your dad is on the line." So dad was watching his bad performance. So he spoke to his dad, and then he came back, and his secretary was Ted Sorensen. So Ted Sorensen said, "What happened, Jack?" He said, "Ted, you know, the greatest thing about my father is that even if I were to fall flat on my face, he would say, Jack, the way you picked yourself up was just out of this world." So that is the thing about resilience, that no matter how badly you perform in one arena, you try and pick yourself up and try to put your best foot forward. Moving on, my next question will be the value of mentorship. What is a mentor, and how important is it for the student of today to find and retain a good mentor?
So absolutely, mentorship, I cannot stress enough, is absolutely critical. It's not a nice to have, it's a must have. And it's the single best thing students can do for themselves. In fact, make this a lifelong mission, no matter at what age or what stage you are, even long after you're no longer a student, actively go and seek mentorships. This is the only way to shortcut and fast track. I don't believe in shortcuts, but I do believe learning from others and those who have already are ahead of us. And therefore, I would strongly encourage everyone who's listening to this to not just be reactive, but to proactively go and seek mentorships. And इसमें दो बातें हैं, दो पहलू हैं. Honestly, if you ask me what's my single biggest regret in my life, is that perhaps I did not seek as many mentorships as I should have. Or let me start by defining mentorship, because some people confuse it with coaching. You can have a coach, but that does not substitute a mentor. A coach can be anyone who is skilled, who is certified, and coaches by design are not meant to pass on any wisdom. They're only there to ignite questions and help you seek answers within you. So a good coach will never uh, give answers. They will only ask you questions. Whereas a mentor is somebody who is already an expert in a specific field. And therefore, the whole idea is to go to them and say, please, can you teach me what you have learned in 10 years if I can achieve it in a year? Can you break it down for me? Can you put it in steps and stages? And that's why mentorships are critical. And I would say, number one, don't complain that, hey, I don't have access. In Singapore, we're very blessed. We just had a 3-day conference here on SG mentorship, Singapore mentorship. There are lots of forums here. I myself am mentoring some students here. So there's an active industry university partnerships, because they recognize the value of mentorships. लेकिन अगर आपको ये सब चीजें दस्तयाब ना भी हों, तो I would say look for any and every opportunity. It's your responsibility. First, be clear on who do you want to be mentored by? What expertise are you looking for? Once you're clear on that, make a list of who these people could be. And maybe these are celebrities, maybe these are famous people, these are public people that you will have never access to. But in today's day and age, there's no excuse. You can go on YouTube, you can go on LinkedIn, you will find their reels, you can find what they think about it. वो भी नहीं तो आप AI पे लिख दें, what does such and such person believe on this topic? How would they advise me? That's literally what I did 5 days ago. I had a problem and I gave them 5 famous people and I said, tell me what would each of them advise me. That's the next best thing you can do to meeting these people. और एक आखिरी चीज जो मैं जरूर एम्फसाइज करूंगा कि मेंटरशिप का ये मतलब भी नहीं है कि आपको अनडिवाइडेड डिवोटेड अटेंशन मिले of of a absolutely world famous leader. वो तो नहीं होने लगा. Mentorship एक attitude है, which means it goes back to that curiosity that I mentioned, कि आप लिफ्ट में भी हों और लिफ्ट वाले से भी सवाल पूछें कि दिन में कितने चक्कर लगाते हो, who comes in, what's the gender divide, जो भी हो, एक वो आपके अंदर एक curiosity हो, तो आप मेरी the most fascinating conversations that I learned the most from in Singapore are not conferences. Every day in the taxi. And I learned so much from these people. The wisest people in a lot of companies are the drivers, because they have access to a lot of information and conversations. So don't apply filters, just have a mentorship attitude, and that will take you places.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. We are experiencing some technical difficulties here, but we will continue to the next question, which is how important will entrepreneurship be in the future? I mean, there was a time when people used to say and say proudly that I'm just going to do a job all my life. I don't want to be an entrepreneur. I don't want to start something. But will that change in the future? How important will entrepreneurial initiative be in the future?
Honestly, there is no running away from entrepreneurship. Very simply because let's talk about what day and age are we alive in. Now, you might have heard of the 3 eyes model. We've lived, human society has lived through different ages: the ice age, the iron age, the industrial age, maybe more recently, even the information age. लेकिन इसमें मैं एक एक और आय का इजाफा करूंगा, the day and age in which we live in, you are living in, is the ideas age. And entrepreneurship is entirely built around ideas. All the old models are being broken down. Honestly, half the Fortune 500 companies didn't exist 25 years ago, and the other half may not exist in the next 25. So it's all about finding new ways of doing business. And therefore, entrepreneurship is no longer an option. I feel very scared when people don't even have that in mind or keep that as an option, because we really can't rely on others. We have to be responsible ourselves. You don't know. Disruption is happening so fast that the company that you aspire to be working in, will it even be in business by the time you graduate? And therefore, a part of you needs to have entrepreneurship as a possibility, as something, even if you're not gunning for it, then something that you have somewhere at the back of your mind. And again, don't wait for it to start uni or finish uni. Entrepreneurship can, think big, start small, and then scale fast. That's one of my favorite posts. So you don't need to uh, wait for anyone's permission. Anything that you're passionate about, start today. Start it really small. Who knows, by the time you graduate, instead of distributing your CV, you'll be collecting CVs and offering jobs to people. So absolutely, entrepreneurship is not something that can be ignored.
And as you mentioned, the gig economy, but I believe there is a gig economy. I believe there's a very strong and a very solid, albeit consolidated, traditional economy there out there as well, that students can take advantage of. But as you said, in order to take advantage of anything, the early bird catches the worm. So the sooner the students start, the better it will be for them, and they can go. And one thing that people should realize, a student of mine came and he wanted to become a doctor, and later on another came, he wanted to become an engineer. And I believe that there are two very important components of this objective, that by the time you graduate, instead of throwing your CVs around, you should be collecting them. And one of them, I'm very sure, is that no matter what you want to become, uh, the most important thing for a doctor these days is not a compounder, it's not a dispensary. It is creating capacity in terms of letting the market know that you are a doctor and you are there and how you can be accessed. And I think for that, digital marketing techniques become as important for doctors as they become for, let's say, a computer scientist. So that is something that I believe. And the same thing is true for engineers. The same thing is true for consultants. Develop your own capacity, because the time when people used to go around looking for Vivian Lee to star in Gone with the Wind, those days are gone. Today we are the consumers and we are the producers, and we need to do these things for ourselves, because no one is going to discover our talent and no one is going to market them. People are too busy marketing themselves. So that is something that I believe in. Anyway, so let's go to our next question. And I think now we are moving to nicer things. Um, think about your own university education. Which university did you go to, and how did that university shape you? So let's talk about that.
So Nadeem, just before we go into that, I want to comment on what you said earlier. Absolutely. I think we used to say in marketing, awareness and availability, these were two fundamental truths that had to be there for any brand to succeed. And that's exactly true of each one of us and everyone who's listening, because in the future, no matter what you decide to do, like Nadeem said, whether it's engineering or doctor or lawyer or architect or even some of the professions that haven't been even created today, you will need to think about your personal branding. You will need to think about your personal identity. And gone are the good old days where we could have business cards. Here's one that I got printed after long just because I wanted to, but we don't use these anymore. The business cards of tomorrow are your YouTube channel, your LinkedIn profile, You need all of that to make sure that people know how to get access to. So I couldn't agree more. And one last thing before we move into the next part of this conversation is, if you don't remember anything that we discuss, please just remember that even before you decide what you want to do, whether it's medicine or law, uh, what's the criteria? How will you decide that? I made the mistake of thinking which profession has scope. How will I make money? How will I support a family? We no longer live in that day and age. We have celebrity chefs who are making a killing. We have people who are YouTube influencers and still making more money than others. So I think what should be your North Star, what should dictate your North Star, is just two things. Your interest, आपको इंटरेस्ट किस चीज में है, what brings you joy, and your strengths. Again, at least when I'm sure Nadeem and I were growing up, we were told to close the gaps, to narrow areas where our skills were not there. It's not about that. It takes 10 years to do that. You can start from tomorrow by really creating a gap, by riding on your strengths. So ये दो चीज़ों का पता होना बहुत ज़रूरी है कि इनफरादी तौर पे at your level for you, what are your interests? Because naturally जिस चीज़ में आपका interest होगा, you won't be watching the clock. You will become वो एक कहते हैं ना कि I'd rather be a failure at something I love than be a success at something I hate. Because eventually, if it's something you love, you will not remain a failure. You will succeed. And eventually, if it's something you hate and you're successful, you will lose interest and you will become a failure. So be clear on what your interests are, not what the scope is, because then you can be amongst the top 1%, and what your strengths are and how can you dial up those strengths. So just wanted to say that. Now moving to your question, Nadeem, which is about which university did I go to. So again, it's a question of having the wrong priorities and maybe making the wrong choices. I had the choice of going to either London School of Economics, LSE, or University of Manchester. And maybe your students will be surprised that I chose to go to University of Manchester simply because उन दिनों इंटरनेट तो था नहीं, brochures आते थे through the door. तो brochure में मैंने पढ़ लिया था कि in the specific faculty that I was applying for, degree was broadly BA Honors Economics, but my specialism, my major was Accounting and Finance. And Accounting and Finance में University of Manchester का 5-star था. उन दिनों ये भी नहीं पता था कि 5-star क्या होता है. I couldn't even double click, but it sounded good. And LSE के brochure में ये नहीं था. तो हम तुर्रम खान बने, हमने कहा हम तो मैनचेस्टर जाएंगे. टाइम उतना ही लगता है, पैसे उतने ही लगते हैं, but very different experience. Longer term, no regrets. I really had a good time in Manchester. LSE की feel was very different. University of Manchester was like a student town. But 5-star का बाद में पता चला कि all that 5-star meant was in research. In research, कितने papers किस faculty ने publish कराएं, which has nothing to do with teaching. So again, that was the wrong selection criteria. But to get to your other question, yes, I did spend 3 beautiful years in Manchester. I did an honors degree. And then how did it prepare me for the future? Well, ironically, after all these years, just last week, for the first time, I went to the alumni here in Singapore. We are blessed to have a campus here in Singapore as well. They've been here for 12 years. Somehow I'd never gone there. And I was given a very warm reception, and that brought back a flood of memories. And I think the key learning was how did it help you? I can start complaining and tell you lots of things where it didn't help me. But the fact is that I would like to think about it. How did I make it work for myself? How did I sweat it? How did I ensure that it helps me? Because I this ended up being my first degree, ended up being my last degree. And therefore, I was quite active, not only in the lecture hall, but outside the lecture hall. So I actively chased experiences, societies, clubs, positions of responsibility. And my advice to anyone starting university would be, just as particular as you may be to not miss any lecture, I would say make sure you don't miss going to another place every week, at least once. And that's the careers office. Every good university will have a careers office. That's where you make that university work for yourself. So that's how I think I was fortunate, and I could really benefit from visiting people from other big recruiters, got interviewed on campus, and I ensured that even before my degree was completed, I had 2 job offers. Not only because I was the brightest student, no, but only because I really ensured that I kept an eye out for these opportunities and I capitalized on them.
And that surely brings us back full circle to the thing that you said initially about being curious, because that was the one thing that you were exhibiting throughout, and that was curiosity about the opportunities in the environment, and also your strengths and how you could develop those strengths to take advantages of those opportunities, which is very important. And this is what students need to learn, that you have to be realistic about your strengths. One of the qualities of good managers is that they know what they don't know. There is no shame in accepting the fact that I don't know something, and then I can hire the right talent for getting that work done. So that is indeed a very important thing, and that was something that you did, and became a reason for your success. Something you mentioned while you were talking, how important is diversity in determining the quality of university education, and how important should this be a factor in choosing a university?
So diversity is fundamental. And if you can choose for yourself an environment that's not completely alien, and it's also not just a single culture, single nationality, that will really serve you well. बिकॉज टाइम तो उतना ही लगना है, आपकी 3 या 4 साल की डिग्री होगी, बजाय इसके कि आप उस मुद्दत में सिर्फ एक कल्चर, एक तहजीब, एक कम्युनिटी, एक सिविलाइजेशन के बारे में सीखें. अच्छा है कि एक पूरा मजमुआ और आप it's an experience for life. I was very blessed that not only in my university, which was the largest student collective in Europe, 60,000 students at that time, 4 universities, which was very diverse. But I was also blessed that I ended up working for companies, and even the countries, the hubs, the business hubs where I worked were very diverse. Dubai, London, Singapore. These are like global hubs where you have at any point in time 50 nationalities. And then I was very blessed in the company that I work in Unilever. No matter where you go, in any I still remember always being fascinated in any meeting that I would enter. I would literally count the number of people, and almost it'll be the same number of nationalities. So it was almost like working for a UN. और उसमें आप बहुत कुछ सीखते हैं, because एक चीज जो आपको formally नहीं सिखाई जाती, but it is a real skill in life, is cultures and how to unpack cultures and what are those cultural nuances. There are many countries in the world where a yes doesn't mean a yes, and there are many countries, that's Indonesia, and there are many countries in the world where a no doesn't mean a no, and that's India, the way they move their head. तो ये चीजें आप तभी सीखते हैं जब आपको exposure हो. And now I can differentiate between, in my part of the world, just to give you an example, how Filipinos are so different from Indonesians, which are so different from Koreans, which are so different from the Thai, from the Vietnamese, and ये सब आसपास की जगह, but they are very, very different. So diversity, to your point, Nadeem, is huge. We can't always control it, but definitely one should aspire to.
Okay, thank you for that. And obviously, the trick should be that people should get exposed on the campus to as many cultures, as many attitudes, as many attributes of people as they can, so that they themselves can learn and become diverse. And then they should synthesize that and study their own books to develop their own integrated narrative. That will be a successful education, where you interact with everyone on Manchester, on the campus of Manchester, or on the campus of LSE, and then you study books that are written and printed and published by the British. So that will become the main thing. And unfortunately, what we are doing here is we are giving students the most monolithic, if I may use that word, the most monolithic, or the most non-diverse environment in which to study, and then we are making them study book published in every country of the world. So this is the exact opposite approach of what should happen. You should give your student your book. A person studying in England does not study book from China, no matter how advanced China becomes, but they interact with Chinese culture so that they can take advantage from their own standpoint from what China can offer them. So absolutely, that's why diversity is an extremely important thing and an extremely important factor when choosing a university. Let me just ask you, what then is the university planning process? When should it start, and how should a student go about planning for university education? And how important is the role of the career planners and parents in this process?
Sure. So Nadeem, before I get into the timings, I think clarity is number one. You need to know and be clear, what is it that you love? What is it that you want to pursue? And you need to work backwards. I always think about, I always say that think of the end, keep the end in mind, and work backwards from there. So you're not really just selecting a course or a university or a country. You're effectively deciding your career. So you need to think of a degree as a stepping stone. What is it leading you to? Where do you want to settle in life? Therefore, if that's your ambition, uh, will your degree be recognized in that country from where you're planning to go now? So it's about, is this degree serving your end goal? It all begins from there. So having that clarity. Or the second thing would be, for me, a very important criteria on selecting your university would be flourishing. Where do you see yourself flourishing? Because you're not just getting into a university, it's also the environment, the overarching culture, language, where you'll be going. Will you be comfortable? These are very important factors. So give yourself the chance to succeed, and it's not just the university, but the entire package there, which is important. And therefore, you need to think of what kind of an environment will you flourish in, what is required, and क्या इस यूनिवर्सिटी में वो चीज़ें हैं या नहीं. रहा सवाल role of parents, role of counselors, they are there. They are blessings. Don't see them as people who are challenging you or pushing you to look a different way. I always say, wherever there's a vacuum, people will step in. तो अगर आपको खुद को क्लैरिटी है और आपको खुद एक उमंग है, एक जुस्तजू है, nobody will come in unnecessarily unless they see you failing or setting yourself for failure. Parents will only step in when they think you are unclear, or when they think you're not making the right efforts, or counselors will only step in when they think you're left behind and you're not doing the right thing, or you're making an entirely different choice. So please tap on the experience. But the fact, if someone's poking their nose, then remember, don't point a finger at them. There's a vacuum that you are leaving. And that's what you need to get over. In terms of timings, of course, the earlier the better. In the US, it makes a difference if you apply early. In the UK, the time is, I believe, now, or latest by January if you're not applying to Oxbridge. But before you get there, give yourself a good chance to succeed. The forms are a labor of love. The applications require many sittings and lots of rewritings and resittings. So you can't just start it a night before. So I would say work backwards, design your life. You're not just picking a university in abstract terms. How does it serve your purpose or what you want to achieve? Select based on environment where you will flourish, and then eventually start early. Look at the form, start writing it now, and capitalize on all the expertise that you have in the form of counselors and parents. But don't let the fact that you've left vacuum be a reason why they need to step in.
Okay, so because we are now nearing the end of time, and we have about 9 minutes to go. No, I think we have 10 minutes to go. So if we go back to where we started, the environment of 2030. So in your opinion, what are we looking at in 2030 in terms of the work environment, in terms of the job market, and what specific skills do you think will be more marketable in 2030?
So in 2030, obviously, I don't have a crystal ball, but I can imagine that not only will things be competitive, they will be fiercely competitive. So prepare for a world where अगर अभी ratio 100:1 का है for the job market or for applications anywhere, फिर होगा 10,000:1. So fiercely competitive. Things won't just be moving, but very fast moving, very fast moving. वो कहते हैं, and I heard this quote back in 2010, and now every year it never fails to amaze me that what you are living through now is probably the slowest phase of your life. So as crazy as it feels now, in 5 years your life will uh, pick up pace even more. So fiercely competitive, very fast moving. But I think the only slightly positive thing that I hope would be that it'll be fair. It will be more equitable and more fair for good talent. What is good talent? That has the right skills. So if you set yourself up with all the things we spoke about, with the right attitude, being curious, with being adaptable, having the resilience, and with those things you approach your entire next few years in your learning journey, then you're setting yourself up for success. Because, and the reason why I say it may be more equitable is because look at what AI has done. Yes, AI has disrupted in a big way. We don't even know what's hit us yet. But AI is also, I believe, an equalizer. Because what it's done is no longer does it matter where you are or who you are. What matters is what you know and how good you are in using AI. So therefore, AI may not replace all jobs, but the people who know how to use AI will definitely replace jobs of those people who don't. So if you've got the right skill set and if you've approached your degree with the curiosity, with the holistic approach that I mentioned, which is not only on campus but off campus, then you're setting yourself up for success, because hopefully then you will be able to go after a very fiercely competitive and fast moving market and put yourself as a great candidate for whatever opportunities may lie.
So then the difference between the 20th and 21st century becomes that in the 20th century, we used to live to win. And in this century, we are going to win to survive. So, and we again need skills. But then I think that even with all its challenges, I think this is a great time to be young, a great time to learn. And it's a great time overall in the history of in the history of human beings and the history of especially young people. So every person is influenced by somebody. We cannot live in a vacuum, and we cannot say that we succeeded or achieved all on our own. So looking back, who is the person who mentored you or who influenced you in the most positive way, and what did you learn from them?
Sure. So, Nadeem, there's no one person. I think I would start with my father. Clearly, he's played a pivotal role until to this day. He takes an active interest, and I look up to him. So, both my parents, bless them, they've played a big role. My brothers, one particular cousin of mine who's in the UK, I always looked up to him, and he and his wife have been, very kind to me, and especially during my student years. They were my home away from home. So I'm very grateful to them. My wife, who for the last 2 decades has not only patiently, uh, uh, you know, uh, she's played a big role. My kids mentor me a lot, believe it or not. Reverse mentoring is going on, and some very close friends too. But maybe the one, if you really ask me, the one person, and this is an unlikely one person, and maybe interesting for your audience, who's really not only influenced me, but in many ways quite literally changed the person I was. Of all the people, you'll be surprised, it was my father-in-law. And as loving and as endearing my mother-in-law is, and I'm very grateful to have her, she's filled the vacuum of my mother not being here. But my father-in-law, just by being him, and again curiosity, by observing him, there was this one particular incident which, if we had time, I would narrate. But in short, this was in Saudi Arabia, where he literally showed me the power of communication. Because I could not even string a sentence together. I couldn't have had this dialogue that we are having about 15 years ago. But there was this one incident where he literally showed me in Saudi Arabia, by conversing with people where he didn't even have the language skills, which was Arabic, that for communication, you just need a will. You don't need anything else. And that day fundamentally changed the way I approached life, and the opportunities that I was pushing away from myself. And pretty much what I'm doing today, I would have never even imagined had that incident not been there. So he's had a huge impact on my life.
Okay, and the final question for this session, maybe we will have you in the future as well if you have the time. But the final question is, what is your definition of success?
Sorry, Nadeem, I couldn't hear the question at all. Please, could you repeat that?
What is your definition of success?
So, in one word, fulfillment. या उर्दू में जिसको आप गालिबन राहत कहेंगे, सुकून. And of course, the path to fulfillment is not easy, and it doesn't come easily. But I don't know if we have time and whether your audience would have heard this already. But एक बहुत मशहूर किस्सा है एक मछेरे का, एक फिशरमैन का. अगर वक्त हो तो मैं 2 मिनट, it'll take 2 minutes. But that really, for me, is the definition of success. Basically, there was this really successful businessman. You can say maybe somebody who, in today's terms, would be who sold his startup for $1 billion and then went on a holiday to some famous resort in the world, let's say Hawaii or Bali. Finally checked into the 6-star hotel and went to the river nearby. तो वहां पे उसने देखा कि एक शख्स बैठा हुआ है, उसने हैट लगाई हुई और बस खामोशी से फिशिंग कर रहा है, और सुनसान जगह थी. तो ही आस्क्ड हिम कि तुम यहाँ क्या कर रहे हो. तो दैट गाय टर्न बैक एंड ही सेड, आई कैन आस्क यू द सेम क्वेश्चन. तो ही सेड, वेल, मैं तो पिछले 10 साल मेहनत की, $1 बिलियन का बिजनेस बनाया, उसको मैंने अभी बेचा है, अब मैं अयाशी करने आया हूँ. तो उसने कहा, तुम यहाँ क्यों आए हो? उसने कहा, वेल, ऑब्वियसली ये 6-स्टार रिजॉर्ट है, तुम भी वहीं रहते हो? कहते, नहीं, मेरी तो यहाँ झोपड़ी है, मैं यहाँ रहता हूँ, लेकिन तुम बाहर क्यों आए हो? उसने कहा, ऑब्वियसली मैं होटल में बैठ के क्या करता हूँ, मैं बाहर आया हूँ नदी के किनारे, जैसे तुम बैठे हो, मजे से सुकून से बैठूंगा और अब फिशिंग करूंगा. तो ये तो मेरी कहानी है, तुम्हारी क्या कहानी है? तुम्हें भी यही करना चाहिए, तुम जाहिल हो, तुम तो फटे पुराने कपड़े पहने हुए हो, वक्त ज़ाया करो, तुम्हें भी यही करना चाहिए जो मुझे करना है. चाहिए। तो उसने कहा क्यों? उसने कहा इसीलिए ताकि तुम जाओगे, बिजनेस बनाओगे, पैसा कमाओगे, फिर उसने कहा फिर मैं क्या करूंगा? फिर तुम आओगे 6 स्टार होटल में रहोगे, फिर मैं क्या करूंगा? फिर तुम आके नदी के किनारे फिशिंग करोगे, सुकून से बैठोगे। तो उसने कहा ये तो मैं ऑलरेडी कर रहा हूँ। तो एग्जैक्टली अक्सर ये होता है कि वी एंड अप setting these false mirages, and we keep chasing them in life, and then in the process we lose time, and age catches up in health. But I think ये बड़ा clear होना चाहिए कि eventually what does fulfillment mean for you. और मैं कहूँगा मुझे तो एक कॉफी का कप भी मिल जाए गरम, तो उसमें बहुत राहत है, उसमें बहुत सुरूर है. So I think there are lots of things that bring you joy. Actively go after them, but don't chase mirages. Be very clear and enjoy the journey. ये fulfillment कोई एक once in a lifetime finest moment की कहानी नहीं है, हर पल हर वक्त. So that's my message, that we should all chase fulfillment, but first define it for yourself, and it's not something in the distant future. It's something that you can live starting now.
Thank you very much indeed, and indeed wise words and well spoken. And with these words of wisdom, we come to the close of today's session with a corporate leader, and also someone who's done very well in as a student and as a professional. Please don't forget that on Tuesday we have a face-to-face physical session on the same topic, what's going to be important in 2030, and that will start November 6th at 11 a.m. So I hope to see you then. Thank you very much, sir, and God bless you and God bless your family, and hope to keep in touch with you. Thank you for your time.